Thank you. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember that your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council website, YouTube website, and making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. I'll read out about the other attendees are to film, photograph and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting is made aware of it. I think that's slightly irrelevant. To ensure that the recording quality is maintained, could members please speak clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Welcome. Welcome to those in attendance. I now ask Ms. Gibbons to introduce the officers.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Kelly Gibbons. I'm the Development Management Service Manager. To my right, we have Andy Banks, who will be presenting item 6, which is the only item we have on the agenda today. We also have Katie Jones from the Local Highway Authority with us here. And online, we have our legal advisor, Georgina Coley. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on now on to the agenda as outlined. Item 1, apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor Jackie Carwadine, Claire Davis, Dave Davis and Mark Woodall. No other apologies? No. All right. Name substitutes. Councillor Alan Williams is acting as substitute for Councillor Dave Davis, and Councillor Mark Dykes is acting as a substitute for Councillor Carwadine. Item 3. Please indicate if you wish to declare an interest, and I will call each councillor in turn. No one wishes to declare an interest? Well, right, go on to minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of December. Are the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of December approved? Please indicate. Those in favour. Agreed? Against? Abstentions?
That's carried.
2. Okay, that's carried. Right, I have no announcements other than at the end of the this particular planning application we will be having a briefing from our officers on certain matters. Right, we'll move on now to the application first and only application on the agenda, Barns at Monkbury Court, Monkhyde, Village Road, Monkhyde. Dwelling of 2 numbers, agricultural building, proposed number of 4 dwelling houses with garages and landscaping. You'll see in the paragraph in your planning agenda, you'll see under 1.1 the reason for this this meeting that was deferred and the reasons why. I'll hand over to Mr. Banks now to make the presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. As Councillor James has said, the application was deferred at Planning Committee on the 15th of October 2025. There were 3 particular reasons that it was deferred, and they're set out at paragraph 1.1. But just very briefly to summarise that, it was to do with the scale of the houses and concern about overlooking, that the layout was excessively restrictive and cramped, and that the houses weren't particularly in keeping with the local vernacular. So the report that you've got before you deals specifically with those matters. What I don't intend to do today is to revisit the sort of basic principles which you discussed back in the 15th of October. So if we can go on to the slides, please. So just to recap, the site's in Monkhyde. It's accessed off the A417. And you can see it there identified by the red star. Next slide. That just shows the application site outlined in red. There's a long access which sort of winds its way back to the 417. What that slide doesn't show, but we'll talk about a bit later, is the development that is to the north and south of the application site. But there you can see the two buildings that are on the site presently, and those are both to be demolished. Next slide. These are just elevations of the existing buildings. They're fairly nondescript, as you will have probably recalled from when you visited the site. But we've also got some photos of them as well. Next slide. So here we go. This is the first of the buildings. It's sort of a concrete style building. That bounds the one side of the site where you'll see just in that slide the roof of one of the new dwellings that's been constructed. What this also shows you is the way that the land has been made up over parts of the site. So there's a pile of spoil there in the foreground of that photograph, which is well over 1 metre in height. One of the concerns has been about loss of privacy and overlooking. The one thing I'd ask you to think about is the fact that those levels won't be, as you see in these photographs, for many instances. There is an additional condition recommended in the update report, which asks for details of site levels prior to commencement. And that's really just to reflect the fact that you've got these made up areas across the site. Next slide. So again, just another photo. You can see again the existing development that lies to the north of the application site there, the gable end of one of the properties. Next one. And that's the second building, which is a brick-built single-storey building with a profiled sheet roof. Again, that's to be demolished as part of this application. Next slide. So, as I've said, it was deferred from committee back in the 15th of October. This is the layout that you were presented with at that time. There was some concern about the fact that it was cramped, and members talked about the area to the west, which you can see that with a green line which sort of defines the hedgerow, and there's an area beyond that which wasn't to be utilised as part of the application. And members discussed whether there was a possibility that that area of land might be incorporated in a bit more detail to make the application site more expansive and to improve the layout of the site. So if we move on to the next slide. So this is the scheme as amended, and what you can see there is indeed that land has been incorporated a lot more into the site. To improve the size of the curtilage of the properties and the plots themselves. Crucially as well, and again we'll look at it in a bit more detail, you'll see now that whereas the garages were integral or attached to the barns, particularly plots 1, 2 and 3, which gave you a sort of a continuous built line of development, the garages have now been separated. They are presented as standalone buildings. And the actual dwellings themselves are now sort of truly detached dwellings. On to the next slide. So just to compare the two, just to make it a little bit easier, you can see there how the site has been, or the plot sizes have been increased to utilise that area of land to the west. I think that just sort of sets out in a bit more detail how that has happened and gives you a bit of clarity in that regard. Next slide. So again, just by way of comparison, the top part of that slide shows you the scheme as it was presented back in October. As I've said, you have this continuous line of development with the garages sitting very much between the dwellings and sort of presenting itself as a continuous line of development. Underneath you've got the revised scheme, which you can see the garages have been separated, and it just gives a bit more sense of space around the development, and allows you to sort of get sort of aspects of views through the development and breaks it up more generally. On to the next one. So in terms of the sort of layout and the design, the actual design of the dwellings themselves haven't changed significantly, but our view is that, you know, that by virtue of the changes to the layout and the separation of the garages, that just improves the appearance and the design of the dwelling overall. This photo shows you a view looking back to the converted buildings that lie to the south. As I said earlier, this photo is taken from a position on made-up land. This is approximately a photo taken looking back from the front elevation of the dwelling on plot 1. But what you really do need to consider is actually the actual floor level of the property will be a good metre and a half lower than that photo is taken from. The distances there between the properties are well over 30 metres. Our view is that's more than adequate in terms of amenity. There is a lot of glazing in the front elevations of the dwellings proposed, but at the distances that we've got, the fact that you've got this courtyard between the two, we've taken the view that that's more than adequate to protect amenity. You can also see from the elevations of the buildings there, they don't have an awful lot of fenestration facing out onto the courtyard, so opportunities for overlooking a loss of privacy really aren't that significant. Next slide. This photo is taken looking back, again talking about the made-up ground, and you can see Monk's Rest, which is the new development that lies to the north of the application site. And again, you're looking from a position which is it will effectively be in front of the unit that would be on plot 1. Next slide. You'll see from the update sheet that we've had some additional representations from a local resident who's concerned with loss of privacy and amenity, and it's this particular property that you can see the gable end of. Perhaps what we might do in a minute is just go back to the layout, but just for now, this is the approximate location of plot 3, and the dwelling has been shifted further west. You can see there a sycamore tree that lies on the boundary of the application site. That is to be retained as part of the development. I went back and looked at the site again yesterday just to reassess what the impact on the residential amenity of this property might be. I actually think that the shifting of the building further to the west actually reduces that impact on amenity. The majority of the first floor windows look across open fields. You can see from the second part of the lower photograph there, the properties on Monk's Rest have got relatively small gardens at the back, and then you have agricultural land beyond that. Some of it seems to have been given over to the residents and they've fenced it off informally, but it is essentially agricultural land that lies immediately behind them. Again, this is another area where you've got made up land. You can see from the top photo, you've got the ground level there at the sort of right hand side. The fence at the back, difficult to judge from a photograph, but the height of that fence is approximately 3 metres. So at ground level, there's absolutely no potential for overlooking. At first floor level, what you'll have is bedroom windows looking across open farmland. They will look across an element of the garden of that property, but in a residential context, that's not an unusual situation to have. And again, I don't think that's a reason to justify refusal of the application. Next slide. Is that it, is it? There we go. Oh yeah, if we could just go back to the layout. It's that comparative one, that's the one. So you can see plot 3 at the top sort of left-hand corner there. And you can see how that relates to the property that we've just been looking at on Monk's Rest. And then at the bottom, you can see how it's shifted further to the west. And as I've said, you can sort of envisage that those windows will sort of look across that sort of blank area, the sort of trapezium type shaped piece of land that is, as I say, agricultural land at the moment. I think that's about me, Chairman, so thank you very much, and I'll pass over to you for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. And now we'll move on to, we have no public speakers registered, so we now move to the local ward member, who is Councillor Jonathan Lester. He speaks first and has the right to speak at the end of the meeting. He has a time limit of 10 minutes, Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. And because there are no public speakers and only one item on the agenda, I'll speak for the full 10 minutes to entertain you all. Yeah. No, I won't. Well, first of all, thank you to committee for deferring the item last year, because you really are the guardians of good planning decisions. And so if you're not convinced, then the purpose of having a deferral is to have that stop and think, so that I can be assured that the planning process is really trying to get the best decision for the communities that I represent. So I really appreciate that opportunity. And I thank all of the members who were involved in that deferral, because, you know, at the end of the day, what we're after is the best results for communities. And I thank them for the opportunity to have that think again. So one of the questions I have, though, is if we refer to paragraph 2.1, the first bullet point says it's evident that the latest draw, this is from a letter that we've received, a further letter of representation. It says that the latest drawing, the developer's not taken note of the planning committee's comments regarding the nature and layout. All he has done is to show detached rather than attached garages, as was the case previously. I assume, Mr. Banks, that's not correct. Or is it correct?
The principal changes to it are indeed the separation of the garages from the dwellings themselves, the fact that the site has been enlarged because we've had that area of land further to the west which has enabled that. The actual design of the dwellings themselves, no, they haven't changed. They are the same as was submitted originally.
But if I'm right, if I've understood your comparison drawings, the orientation of one of the buildings has moved more to the west. Is that the case? Sorry, I need clarification on this, because I think it's important for...
Plot 3 has moved further to the west. Yes.
Right, okay, so that statement there is not quite true, is it? I presume.
From the objector,
Yes.
I
Can I just say, we not normally have a question and answer from the local member, but, you know, I understand the reasons why, but members could take that line further when it comes to debate.
Okay, well, I'll leave that to the committee then. One of the things I would say is, you know, to the committee, you might want to bear in mind the energy efficiency of detaching garages from the main dwelling, because I thought the question is, have they best used the plots? Have they best used the land? Detaching the garages, I don't really see what that's achieved, whether it's, you know, because this isn't about whether we should have detached garages or garages that are attached. This is about the best use of the land that they want to put the houses on. So please, can you, in your deliberations, focus on whether that adds anything, because ultimately what we want is a better arrangement of the houses in the land that has been provided. It would appear that there's an orientation more towards the west of the property, the parcel of land, so it is a better use of land. But I challenge the virtue of detaching the garages, and excuse me, has the land been best used in this way? Is there more to be gained from reorientating the houses? You've heard from the planning officer, Mr. Banks, that he thinks that there's a sufficient separation between the proposed dwellings and the existing amenity. So please bear in mind whether you think that this allocation in the plot orientation has achieved that. And then, of course, the overall design of the properties hasn't shifted in line with the first concern that committee raised. So out of keeping. So in summary, really, you've got your overlooking existing amenity, but has this been the best example of utilising the land to the maximum? And if you can tease out for me and residents whether the properties have been sufficiently shifted to accommodate all of that best use of land, then I would appreciate that to be raised in the debate. So I will sit and listen and then reserve the rest of my comments for after the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll start the debate. Members, Councillor Thomas.
If I remember rightly, and my memory is reasonably good still, one of the main concerns that we had was actually the design. The awful black cladding that seems to be coming proliferous over this county now. And we did, I'm pretty certain that we all did express that if they build them the same as the ones that are already there, you've got the old barns, some which have been converted, some which haven't, which are lovely old Harry Potter brick. And there's no reason that these could not be faced in a similar brick rather than this black, which say is becoming agricultural buildings. Yes, originally probably they were painted black, but and also looking at the design, if the officer can tell us, the old barns that are existing now have all got slate roofs, but these have got tile roofs, or they look like tile roofs. Can you confirm whether or not they are slate or tile, please?
Mr. Banks.
If you can leave that with me, I'll have a look at the application whilst the debate continues, and I'll come back to you on that.
Okay.
As far as matters of orientation and design are concerned, it's quite a narrow site, really. I mean, what you've got to remember from the slide there is that the barns to the south rely on the access. The parking areas that are shown, and that southerly area, are actually parking spaces that relate to those properties. So you don't have the full extent of the site to use for development here. Personally, I think a linear form of development is the right way to go. It sort of creates a secondary courtyard with the other buildings that are further to the south, and my view is that's the correct approach. In terms of the sort of separating of the garages, it's really just an attempt to loosen the development up a little bit, as I said in the presentation, to try and reduce that sort of built line of development that was fairly impenetrable, I guess, from a visual perspective. And what you've got now is a development where you've got spaces between the properties, which actually, again, in my view, it sits a lot more comfortably in that location. Materials-wise, your opinions about vertical cladding, you know, everyone has an opinion about that. Whether or not you're a fan of it or not, that's a matter of judgment and opinion. Given the development that has been permitted further to the north, I'm really not convinced that you could refuse a planning application on the basis that of the design of these. It would be exceptionally difficult to make an argument that this was in some way unacceptable when we have previously seen a scheme approved further to the north that this reflects quite similarly. There is a mix of materials here, so we're not talking entirely vertically cladded buildings. It's a mix of brick and vertical cladding. As I've said, I'll check the materials for the roof. What I would say though is you quite commonly find within farmsteads a mix of building materials, so you won't always see a slate roof across an entirety of a farm holding. You'll often see a mixture of slate and tile, profile sheeting. So again, whether this is brick or tile, I'm not convinced that of itself is a reason to view this unacceptably. But I will go back and check that while the debate continues. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And now, Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much to the Planning Officer for his report and comments. I wasn't at the last Planning Committee and I had a name substitution in my place, so I've had the benefit of going back and looking at the YouTube recording and understanding of the nature of the debate and discussion. I'd like to just clarify a couple of things. One of the key things in the initial debate and discussion was about energy efficiency measures and particularly renewable energy generation, I believe. And that was clarified in relation to the vote on one of the motions that were brought forward. That motion fell away, but I think it was the intention of the committee that energy efficiency and renewable measures were brought forward with this development. And it's clear that they haven't been. I know that wasn't actually the ground for deferral in the end, and we're not, it's difficult to reopen that, as you've said, but I am concerned that we are bringing forward large detached houses with no reference in the planning statement or the design and access statement with regard to energy generation. And we've talked, and you've put a condition in there in condition 14 about efficiency measures, but it isn't talking specifically about generation of renewable energy. There's no reference to, for example, things like EV points, the generation of power. There is information on efficiency, perhaps in terms of needing to put glazing or thermal insulation, but I do not think that we are going to the letter of our core strategy or the neighbourhood development plan in the requirement for energy efficiency and generation measures. I'm concerned that the condition is not strong enough to enable us to address that if this were approved, to enable us to really do anything. Is there anything that the officer can do at this stage that would lead the committee to not refuse this development on that grounds? So I'm tempted to bring a motion for refusal because, for me, this was something that was brought up. It really hasn't been addressed. But I just wondered what your views are. Thank you.
We can certainly look at tightening up the condition to address that and be more specific about energy generation. As far as EV points are concerned, that's a fundamental requirement of building regs. So it's not a condition that we put on planning permissions now because we don't need to, because it's covered by building regs. But certainly as far as sustainable energy generation is concerned, yes, we could look at tightening condition 14 up and covering that a bit more. Perhaps I could just say about the materials as well, Chair. The application form says that they are to be plain tiles, so tiles rather than slates.
Right. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought it best to go back and look at my notes that I made last time before we go further. I was concerned when I first read the report and looked at the drawings, and I was concerned that there didn't seem to be an awful lot of difference. But seeing them up on the screen, where you had the previous design plus the new design underneath, there was clearly an improvement. And my notes were telling me that when I arrived for the site visit last time, I was actually taken aback by the design of the existing buildings there that we were told were agreed on an appeal. But such is life. And I was concerned that there would be an overbearing presence on the two attractive barn conversions on site already, but that appears to have been addressed. And I've also put on here that there were no planning, I could see no planning grounds to actually refuse the application as it was at the time. And I think my decision will be much the same, although I'm told by I'm having read the minutes earlier on, shown by Mr. Evans, that I actually proposed an approval for that application at the time, and I can't see anything that's changed that would change my mind, and I will then say that my recommendation would be for the application to be approved as alongside the officer's recommendation.
Is that a proposal? All right. Is that seconded? With the condition that Councillor Simmons has suggested about regeneration. Yeah, right.
So
So the extra condition, or the enhancement of the condition
Yep.
for energy generation, that's
Energy.
acceptable to the proposer.
Yep,
And is it seconded? Councillor Williams.
Councillor Williams, right.
Councillor Simmons also.
Councillor Simmons now, perhaps comes back on.
Thank you. I'm happier if there is some really toughened wording on renewable energy generation, so thanks for that. There was one other thing that I forgot to mention. I know it's you talked about it in the photos with the sycamore tree that was there, and it's been referenced in some of the objection letters. And I can see that obviously with the construction management requirement of condition 15, that tree and hedgerow protection measures are there prior to commencement of development. But as we know, site clearance isn't development, and we've had in the past experience of things being removed prior to. Is that sufficient, that pre-commencement condition, where there is no TPO on the tree, for example, to protect that? Because I do think that adds to quite some screening and some, visual and landscape improvements. So I think that's quite important.
Yep.
And all we
Ms.
can do
Gibbons?
at this stage is refer it to our tree officer to have a look at it as a candidate for a TPO. You're right, because unless they've commenced work or done something, then that condition doesn't, they need to protect it before they start work. If they don't, then that's a breach. But we can refer it to the tree officer to have a look at as a candidate before.
Right, any other speaker? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. One of the comments made in the original application was the design of the houses, and to be honest, I can't see there's any great alteration in the design. They still don't seem to me to reflect the local vernacular.
The problem is that the previous development, which was given on appeal, rather rides a colt and horses through that. I mean, we wouldn't be able to sustain that at appeal. I find it appalling, actually, what was there before, but unfortunately that was given by appeal.
They just do not seem to. This is a development in the countryside. They just seem to be more suitable to a more suburban setting, that's all.
Right. Are there any other speakers? Yes, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say that I don't think that this is the outcome that is likely to happen is the one that we wanted when we walked away from the site with a shudder. And I agree with Councillor Lester that, if anything, the separate garages make things worse than better. Is it true, can I ask, that there's no back doors? This was raised by objectors. There are no back doors in these houses, that they don't feed into a garden. Have I got that right?
Mr. Banks.
The rear elevations have got large windows, which I assume are like patio type windows. So I would imagine that yes, there are doorways onto the gardens at the back.
Okay. I mean, okay. Well, it was raised on the by the objectors. Look, I've lived in cities and I've lived in deep country, and both have advantages and disadvantages. But I think that this development has the worst of both worlds, and it's very hard to see who would want to live there. And we know that because I think it's only 3 of the 7 previous houses have are actually inhabited. So it's it really is quite galling to see this come up. And I know what our remit from government is to build 10,000 houses, and I suppose it doesn't matter whether anyone lives in them or not. But this is a very, very poor development.
Mr. Banks.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm about the rear access. So that's the ground floor plan of the properties, and they do have bifold doors, so there is access to the gardens at the rear and to the side. As far as one of the comments made was this is open countryside. It's a rural location, but you should remember that it's substantially within the settlement boundary that has been designated in the NDP. So as far as our policy assessment is concerned, it was a matter that was discussed but back in the meeting in October, but this is policy compliant as far as that is concerned because it's substantially within the settlement boundary. I just wanted members to be cognizant of that when you make your decision, because it was a point that was made about being open countryside. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Right, then we'll move on to summing up. Officers, any further comments to be made?
Just to reiterate about materials, condition 9 does require the submission of those details. So we've got an element of control as far as that is concerned. Particularly, you've talked about the roofing materials. So that's something that when we're looking at discharging conditions, if the application is approved, that we can have a think about with the applicants. But other than that, Chairman, no, nothing further to add.
Thank you. Then we'll go back to the local member, Councillor Lester.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, is it possible just to get the picture of the existing barns on the screen, please? Because so much of the debate has been about the appearance of the buildings that were won on appeal. So, the vernacular was dictated to by the appeal decision, not the planning department. If you want the vernacular, no, sorry, can we go back to the picture before? That's right. If you want the vernacular, there's the vernacular. Look, these are the properties that exist and have been existing historically for a very long time. These are the properties that will be in close relation to the new properties. If you were really respecting the vernacular, and that was one of the committee's major concerns, if you were to really respect the vernacular, you'd be looking at brick, and your, Councillor, sorry, it was Councillor Thomas, that's right. Councillor Thomas made the excellent point about using brick, and whatever the tile that you would use, you would hope that it would reflect that. So what you're doing is you're supporting the historic existing rather than supporting the new development that was imposed on us by appeal. So I would suggest that if it can be dealt with by recommendation, by condition, to respect that concern you have about the vernacular, the best way of doing that would be to ensure that the materials more reflect existing barns. And what you can't see here, but members will remember from the site visit, is if you were to look at that photograph and turn your mind and eyes right, there's even larger buildings that are brick vernacular historic buildings. So that's what I think we need to respect. I understand having the garage is being detached on the corner plots, but the ones in the two in the middle, it makes no sense to me to have those detached. That just seems odd. And so I've heard the debate. I appreciate the fact that, this is a designated area for housing, but the question remains in my mind, is this the best use of the site? And if members do think it is, then I think anything you can do to reflect the vernacular of what's already there and attractive, then that should form the basis of your decision. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Right, we have now a resolution which has been proposed and seconded with the suggested by Councillor Simmons. Can I ask for those in favour, please indicate.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 in favour.
Those against? 2. Abstentions? 2.
2 abstentions.
That's carried then. Right. I think we've been sufficiently short. Do we have a first part of... do we want a break? Yeah, all right. If we could now stop the live stream, please. Sorry.